Hello, everyone, and welcome to SABR Day. I'm Scott Bush, SABR's CEO. We're excited to have you here today as we kick off our 50th anniversary celebration with what is absolutely SABR's largest virtual event in our history, and based on current patterns, could well be the largest SABR gathering of all time. So I want to thank all of our members who are joining us today across the world. And I also want to spend some time thanking a few other people as we get started here. I want to thank SABR's board of directors, who has been incredibly supportive of the staff trying out new things, such as virtual programming in the last year or so. I also want to thank our incredible staff who have worked tirelessly behind the scenes to make this event possible. So thanks to Chanel, Jacob, and Scott for all their work. And then I also want to thank our Friends of SABR committee, who really got this idea rolling down the hill. And in particular, I want to thank Jeannie Glazer and Ernestine Miller for all of their efforts in making this event so successful. So welcome to SABR Day 2021. As I mentioned earlier, this is the first of several events that we will be holding in celebration of our 50th anniversary. We do have our virtual analytics conference coming up in March of this year, and please stay tuned for additional announcements about programming that we will have throughout this year, celebrating our 50th anniversary, our golden anniversary. So before we get going with our guests, we do have a first video segment here to share. I want to get things started with some messages from some very special friends of SABR.
Hi, everybody. I'm Johnny Bench, and I just want to congratulate SABR on their 50th anniversary. 50 years. What a great organization, its members, and you've continued to prove each year how successful and how great you are. It's a very special time. I love gold. I mean, gold gloves is really good to have, and gold of any kind. But this is 50 years for you. And another 50 is coming up. Just remember, after a great year, you got to start at zero, but you got to keep going. You got to do the things that kept you where you were and made you successful. So it's up to all the members, all the organization to continue with pride and another 50 years. Congratulations on 50 years, SABR.
50th anniversary of SABR, it's hard to believe. And just think of all of the history that has been put in context and made available to everybody that's interested in sports. It's just a great organization, tremendous people involved in it who really have a love for the game and have preserved so much history that I can tell you as a broadcaster, we use all the time. So congratulations, keep up the great work, and happy 50th birthday.
Hi everybody, I'm Bob Kendrick, president of the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum in Kansas City, and I want to take this opportunity to wish SABR a happy 50th anniversary. And I tip my cap to all who continue to contribute to this great organization and to help promote and advance our great sport. Here's to 50 more incredible years.
Hi, I'm Janet Marie Smith, Senior Vice President of Planning and Development for the Los Angeles Dodgers. Congratulations to SABR on your 50th anniversary. When I first started working in baseball, you were only 20, and I thought you were well established then, and now look at you. You've had such a great influence on the game, and you've had a real impact on me. I really enjoyed my projects from Camden Yards to Fenway Park to Turner Field to Dodger Stadium, and everywhere I've been, there have been SABR members to coach me on what it means to be a fan in those parks. You're amazing.
Hello, this is Bill James. I wanted to wish a happy birthday to SABR on their 50th anniversary. Seems like it's much longer, but that's only because I'm so old. Baseball is very, very lucky to have an organization like SABR that documents what happens in baseball in a way that almost nobody else, not the law, non-medicine. No organization documents its history the way SABR documents baseball. No university has a group that puts online the register of every class ever taught at the university and every professor who ever taught at the university. SABR is very fortunate to have you, and we're all very fortunate to have you. So happy birthday.
Hello, I'm Lindsay Berra. I'm a sports writer. I'm a board member at the Yogi Berra Museum and Learning Center, and I'm also Yogi's granddaughter. He's the guy with 12 strikeouts and over 650 plate appearances in 1950, the guy with a 148 game errorless streak and the 75 World Series hits. Grandpa has way too many great stats to keep track of, which is why I'm glad SABR is there to do it for us. I know if Grandpa were here, he would thank SABR for keeping those stats and his legacy front and center. I know I certainly do. So SABR, cheers to 50 years, and it ain't over yet.
Hi, I'm Tom Hufford, one of the 16 founding members of the Society for American Baseball Research, better known as SABR. A lot has happened since we started SABR in 1971. Back then there were only 24 major league teams, no designated hitter, no wild card team in the playoffs. Who knows what the next 50 years will bring, but I do know one thing. SABR will be there to be part of it. Congratulations, SABR, on 50 wonderful years.
I hope everybody did a little clap in their living room for one of our founding members, Tom Hufford, there at the end. We've got a couple more of those videos coming up yet today, so stick around for those. And as we get started with one of two conversations here today, I'm very excited that both Tim Mead and Bob Costas are joining us. Baseball has given us a lot of interesting topics to cover, particularly in the last month or so. We've seen Major League Baseball announced that they are formally recognizing the Negro Leagues as major leagues. We have seen Theo Epstein join the commissioner's office to address style of play issues within the game. We've had a Hall of Fame election just this week, and it seems someone finally remembered to light the hot stove in the last week or so as well. So a lot of interesting topics, and it's time now to get started with our first featured conversation. SABR is pleased to welcome National Baseball Hall of Fame and Museum President Tim Mead. Tim spent nearly 4 decades in the Los Angeles Angels organization, including 22 years as Vice President of Communications before assuming oversight of the Hall of Fame's operations in 2019. He's a great friend of our organization, and we're thrilled he is joining us today. Moderating the conversation with Tim is author and longtime SABR member Bruce Markusen. He and Tim know each other well, as Bruce has served as the Hall of Fame's manager of digital and outreach learning since 2013.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to our program once again. My name is Bruce Markusen. I work in the education department here at the Baseball Hall of Fame, and I'm joined by the president of our institution, Tim Mead. Tim, I want to begin by talking a little bit about your time with the Angels. You worked there from 1980 until mid-2019. You started out as an intern back in '80. You then became the director of media relations. From there, you became an Angels vice president. What was it, Tim, about that organization that kept you there for 4 decades?
Well, first of all, I'd like to say happy anniversary to SABR. Listening to those intros and knowing a little bit about the history, you're part of something very special, and would like to welcome all those tuning in today. So for me, Bruce, I grew up with the Washington Senators in Arlington, Virginia, and moved out to California in 1969. And in August of that year, we'd settled in Highland, California, and the first thing we did, we were eating dinner on the floor with K rations over a Foot Locker. My dad was in the Air Force, and we turned on the transistor radio. My dad came across KMPC and Dick Enberg calling an Angel Red Sox game, and I was hooked from that moment. 11 years later, to apply for an internship with a club that you really grew up loving was a blessing. And I think for me, that's really what it was. To start someplace and think you're going to be there 40 years is probably a little naive, particularly in this game, in this industry. But as the years went by, I would tell you that I really didn't think about 30 years or 35 years or 40 years. I looked at my life pretty much as season. You just go through spring training, regular season, hopefully October, the holidays. Then you just keep flipping it over. But I think for me, my foundation, aside from things at home with my family, was really established by some great men and women along the way that taught me an awful lot about respect of the game. I think passion, you feed off other people, but you either have it for the game or a topic or you don't. But I grew up around Buzzy Bavasi and Red Patterson and Preston Gomez and George Goodale, just good baseball people. And one of the things that I learned along the way, and I grew up with some good folks that have left their mark in the game. Kevin Ulick with Kansas City Royals and brought the Expos into Washington, and Billy Bavasi and Bob Fontaine. But when we were young, those veteran baseball people, if we were open to asking questions and interested in things, they were open to sharing information with us. And those great conversations during the day, after games, on weekends, to me were the foundation of being there. And then just the experiences. You don't really reflect back until you maybe leave how many things you were really part of. And each and every day, each and every one of those seasons and those experiences, good or bad, was a blessing that really kind of prepared me or reinforced how much I love the game to make a jump that I made to come to Cooperstown.
When you first joined the Angels as a young intern in 1980, their owner was a pretty well-known guy, Gene Autry. Give us a little bit of a synopsis of what it was like to have him as your ultimate boss.
You know, when you look back at it, I will always say Mr. Autry. It's just like I would always say Mr. O'Malley. There's just, those men just command respect. But Mr. Autry talked very, very seldom used the word I or talked about his movie experiences. His highlight, when you really wanted to see a smile on his face, was talking baseball. And if you go into his suite in the stadium today, which has not changed since his passing, his suite still has pictures of Mr. Autry with presidents and ball players. That's it. Not really a lot of the movie portion of his life. He loved the game. He loved his ball players. He loved the family of the players, and he took care of the front office people as well. Mr. Autry didn't travel with a big group or entourage. He would stop by your office. He always went down to see the manager each and every day, go down and see Buzzy or Mike Port and have conversations with him. He knew his players, and I would say that when I look back in 1986, there's probably been very few series postseason where an organization or the narrative of the postseason was about an owner. And that's really what it was for Mr. Autry. We had 64,000 people in Game 5 against the Red Sox. And it's one of those times where the media, I think, was very much polling for that club to finish it off for Mr. Autry to get to a World Series. I think it was just so popular. I think of all the people, not just the Angel personnel he knew and locally, but Billy Martin and others that after the game would come into the press dining room and Mr. Autry would host them, and they would just sit there and talk baseball. And he had this great chuckle and laugh that he so enjoyed hearing others talk about the game he loved.
Tim, during the course of our talk, we're going to take some questions from the audience, and we'll take our first one right now. A person writes in, moving on to the Hall of Fame as you did in the spring of 2019, what was the transition like from the front office of a baseball team to the head of a national sports museum?
Well, it was different and challenging. It was a personal challenge and still is. It's been rewarding because I left an environment where you kind of could roll out of bed and pretty much know you had a lot of the answers or knew where to go to secure those answers. And I think, Bruce, as I stated when we had that first staff meeting, I felt like coming to Cooperstown was walking on a college campus, and I was a freshman, and I had a lot of junior professors or associate professors now teaching me, because when you're on the club level, and again, I defer to all the SABR members listening in, you know a lot about the present, you know about the history about your club. But when you come to Cooperstown, you really realize how little you know about the in-depth history of the game. And that for me has been rewarding, learning the museum aspect of things. You know, I don't have a game every night to worry about whether we're winning or losing, and streaks and stretches and roster moves and all those things. And do you miss it? Yes. Are there different challenges in this role? Absolutely. But each and every time that I spend time with, you know, curatorial and your staff and education, I learn more, and I'm a better baseball person because of it. I really am. And it allows me now not to focus on one club, but 30 clubs and the history of the game.
You mentioned we don't have a game every day, but we're actually open for business more often than a baseball team. We have open hours 362 out of 365 days a year. So in a sense, you could say that every day we're open, which is most days, it's sort of like having a game going on.
Very much so. And I also look at, we probably have the greatest team. I look at baseball or Cooperstown as either the first team or the 31st team, and we're never going to be a club that's going to have to retool or rebuild, because it's only going to get better. And I think that's a great point that you make, Bruce. And, you know, whether we have 1,500 people in the summer or a few dozen in January during the cold spells, that museum and institution, our museum and institution, remains open for anybody that just wants to come see it on a daily basis.
Earlier this week, we had the election for the Hall of Fame by the Baseball Writers of America. None of the 25 candidates received the necessary 75% of the vote. So this year, no one makes it technically for the class of 2021. Tim, a lot of people will ask me, why is it that the Baseball Hall of Fame does not guarantee at least one or maybe more than one electee as the other sports halls of fame do? Football, I believe, guarantees 5 a year. Why don't we in baseball do that?
Because it's supposed to be tough. It's supposed to be the best of the best in the elite. And it's difficult. If you look at this year, with Kurt securing 71%, means 7 out of 10 voters voted for Kurt Schilling. Still didn't make it. And, you know, less than 1% or right around 1% of players are inducted or elected into the Hall of Fame. And one of the beauties of this whole process, Jim Gates sent me an article the other day after the first election about kind of the debate and the discussion and controversy surrounding the first election going back all those many decades. It's a process. It's a process that involves a lot of integrity, a lot of subjectivity. You know, this year there were 414 ballots sent out to the BBWAA. 401 members voted. And if you put those 401 members on a Zoom call such as this, you would have weeks upon weeks of discussion about qualifications to make it in terms of how they see and view each one of the candidates who are on the ballot this year. So I think it makes it difficult. You look back, the BBWA's had a good recent history of inductions. Obviously, there's a lot of variables and elements with which we're all aware of in recent years that affect the ballot. But I also, Bruce, I think it's important when you read some of the social media postings now, or you read some of the articles that are written, this isn't something where men or women that are eligible to vote just, you know, I think we had 5.89% of the ballots were filled out. Each ballot, 5.89 votes per ballot this year. So there's a lot of thought process that goes into it. And it's not supposed to be easy to fill out. It's not supposed to be easy to get in.
Absolutely. You mentioned Jim Gates. For those who don't know Jim was our former librarian who just retired in October. He had been at the Hall of Fame for about 25 years, longtime member of SABR, and as far as I know, he may be watching today. So if Jim's out there, we Hope he's doing well. We miss him in Cooperstown. Now, even though there was no one elected this past Tuesday by the baseball writers, we still have the holdover class of 2020, which did not receive its induction ceremony last year. So there will be a class of Hall of Famers that will be honored this year in some way. We have Derek Jeter, Larry Walker, who were voted in through the writers, Ted Simmons, and the late Marvin Miller came in through the ERA committee. People have been asking, I know they've been asking you, they've been asking me, anybody who works at the Hall of Fame, this question has come up. Will there be a ceremony in Cooperstown this year?
There will be an induction ceremony. And as we sit here now going through this process, we have some alternatives. We're going to see where the circumstances go. Obviously, this pandemic, and hopefully it's closer to being in our rearview mirror to a certain degree than it is in our windshield right now. A lot of work ahead. But like most businesses and companies right now, you have to have alternatives. And some of those alternatives are going to be planning around variables that we just don't know. But one of the blessings for everything we faced, Bruce, when you think about 2020, everyone was affected. We've all had to make changes. But for all the tough realities for the Hall of Fame and for baseball, we had two Veterans Committee or ERA committees that we delayed until 2021. So we weren't going to pick up a possible electee from those. And then the announcement on Tuesday night, but having the class of 2020 to be able to induct in 2021, to me is one of the positives that we're able to pull over from 2020 into 2021. So we will have something. We will not go 2 years in a row without an induction ceremony. What that looks like, we'll probably reveal a little bit more as the weeks go on and we have a better feel for where we might be in July. But I will tell you that those four gentlemen are representatives of Marvin Miller. They will formally be enshrined into the Hall of Fame July 25th.
So that's approximately 6 months away. And for those SABR members watching today who don't live in New York or are not familiar with New York State, Governor Cuomo has recently relaxed some of the restrictions, in particular with regard to restaurants, and some of those relaxed restrictions will be changing coming up in February. So we still do have 6 months with which to play. Let's just say, Tim, for argument's sake, that the state of New York allows a large gathering by this summer, by July, when our induction takes place. If that happens, would that, do you think, translate into a fairly normal Hall of Fame weekend and ceremony?
I think it's difficult, Bruce, and obviously we've put that down on paper and asked a myriad of questions amongst our group and beyond. Obviously, there's a lot of planning that goes in. While we can look at July 25th, what might be at that time, there's certainly some calendar dates that you have to arrive at in your planning much earlier than that. So to project out to that far is going to be difficult. We don't want to throw plans away where you have to pull them back. It's probably a little bit easier to add to it a little bit late than it is to pull back too late. So not to dance around that, but we're going to have to wait just a little bit longer because the circumstances and the variables are changing. They seem to be changing a lot quicker in recent weeks. Certainly, we hope the vaccine is out there, and that we see results around the country that perhaps influence even decisions here. We all know that it's the numbers from the hospitals and those elements. But I think we're going to have to wait and see what our state officials tell us soon. And the Super Bowl is going to be a big experiment, and there's a lot of events coming that will occur before July that obviously all institutions and all events, groups that are putting on events are going to monitor very closely.
Tim, perhaps a couple of things that would work to the Hall of Fame's advantage for a ceremony. Typically, it's a ceremony that takes place outside, generally outside, safer than inside events with large numbers of people. Also, it typically takes place at the Clark Sports Center. They have a huge open field. that actually could accommodate well over 100,000 people. Not saying that we would have that this summer, of course, based on the restrictions that we might be facing, but in theory, you could have 6 figures of people. It's a huge space. There is an ability to spread people out. So those two things, at least a little bit, provide some assistance, I would think.
Well, they do, Bruce. And again, it's, as a society, are we going to make big leaps? I see where Broadway, I believe it's still June 1st before they're going to open up. So there are some dates. I think we're all watching the Olympics very closely and seeing what they do internationally. But if right now we're at 25% capacity, for example, as you well know, within the hall at any given time. Yeah. So what is it going to look like? Are we going to progress from 25 to 50%? Are we going to wait and make big leaps? We're not going to be in the position to project that out. That's why I say hopefully in the next couple of weeks we start to see a trend of optimism. I always say to people, I think we're getting closer to the intersection of hope and optimism than we are having been further away from it. But we watch everything very closely each and every day. One of the things that field provides, while it can hold 100,000 people, it would be equally as difficult to say you're limited to 5 to 10,000 people, because it is what it is. It's an open field, an open area without fenced. This is not an event where you sell tickets and have preferred seating and that. So even that would be problematic to some degree. So we're looking at it, I would like to say, not just every day, but thoroughly throughout the course of each and every day.
Very good. We have another audience question, Tim, and it actually relates to Hall of Fame weekend. This SABR member wants to know, what is something that happens behind the scenes during Hall of Fame weekend that most fans would not have a chance to see?
I think the Hall historically, Bruce, has done a great job, and I appreciate that question. Through Jane Forbes Clark's leadership, my predecessor and good friend Jeff Idelson and Dale Petrosky before him, to try to make it more Cooperstown and village friendly through the years, so that it just wasn't an event where Hall of Famers came in, showed up, and there was a ceremony. So there was the parade. Some of the village shops have Hall of Famers and contract them out to have autograph signings. But a couple of the events, and some fans are able to see, there's a golf tournament on Saturday. But I think the thing for my first one in July of 2019 that really, I had to kind of stand back and just really realize what was going on. There's a brunch before you go out to the induction ceremony, and just the Hall of Famers sitting in there. And then afterwards, you come back to the hotel, there's a cocktail party out on the veranda, and you're obviously the rocking chairs. And to watch Johnny Bench, for example, go and spend time with each of the new electees and give them advice, telling them, enjoy this. His recommendation is write it down in a journal, because by the time you get home, Tuesday gets here, it's going to have been a whirlwind of a surreal experience. And to see the other Hall of Famers kind of reach out is really something special, because from our world, when you go into a club, you have service time. You have the rookie, you have the established veteran, and there is still kind of a protocol of how you conduct yourself in a clubhouse. Well, these are the greatest of the greats in the Hall of Fame, and a newcomer is still the rookie coming into a new club or a new fraternity. It might be hard for people to really kind of fathom that, but that's one thing. It's an event that's very important. And then to me, the dinner after the induction, where it's just the president of the Hall of Fame, the commissioner, and the Hall of Famers. And just to sit there last year in 2019 and watch that group, so many of whom, are responsible for me falling in love with the game, all those many years ago. But to see the interaction, to see some of them come up and say hello to Hank Aaron, say hello, Mr. Aaron, at the time, and the show of respect, to see a table with some of the starting pitchers sitting together and newcomers. It was really refreshing, And to me, it was almost like a formal clubhouse gathering. Instead of having the uniforms and the jerseys and sitting around on the couches, now they're just in fancy suits having many of the same conversations. But some of those conversations obviously changed because they're catching up. Have you seen so-and-so, and have you talked to so-and-so? And they're talking about their families. You know, you realize there's a distance between the time of their careers and where they are now, and their lives have changed and adjusted. But I wish, and I understand the protection of those conversations, because they should be just what they are, as private. But boy, if you could be a fly on the wall and hear the sharing of the greatest of the greats talking amongst themselves, it's wonderful.
Now, Tim, are you expected to speak at that dinner, or do the Hall of Famers do all the talking?
Well, I make a brief introduction, and as soon as I make sure that my leg is not shaking when I start, and I'm not pausing with my voice, say a few words in July, just more or less to introduce myself. I knew 21 just through the years with the Angels in a different way, but to stand up there and then you introduce the commissioner who makes his presentations, and then somebody will get up and welcome the new group or say something as well.
Just from a personal standpoint, one of the things that I get to do during Hall of Fame weekend is I'm a spotter during the Saturday night parade, which has become a very popular event. So I'm right there on Main Street. There's stanchions set up on either side, barricades, and the fans, even though they are held back by the barricade, they're right next to me, and they're always asking me, who's coming up next? Who's the next Hall of Famer? What's it like? How do I get to do your job? So I get a lot of that kind of conversation that you're not going to see necessarily on television or video, but it's a lot of fun to be part of that very small behind the scenes aspect to the ceremony. Tim, aside from concerns about this year's ceremony, 2021, what do you feel are some of the most pressing issues the Hall of Fame is facing this year over the next 12 months? What's at the top of your list?
Returning back to normal. And I think that all companies and all businesses, we're all looking to do that. Obviously, we want to grow, Bruce, get back to some numbers and attendance. I think we have to be realistic in that and see how the year unfolds. So we're going to take small steps, but ultimately it's growing our audience, having folks come to Cooperstown. But I think 2020 also gave us a look into how we need to expand the brand externally as well. The virtual programming, which you've played such a huge role in, and I'd like to thank you publicly for that. But we're going to look at our infrastructure and our storage or collection storage, looking at that for the future. We're going to put out a Diamonds of the Hall of Fame, a YouTube program. So I think explore more ways ultimately to take ourselves outside of Cooperstown with that reach. We have members in all 50 states who are members of the Hall of Fame and support it financially. And certainly not all those folks have been there. And I think that we strive to have a goal to thank them for that and draw new members and a new audience by taking our programming externally. And a lot of that's new technology. A lot of that's new content. We're going to improve our education, which is our programming, which is already top notch, but you just continue to get it better. And I think that reach we have with some new sponsorships that's going to have a farther reach into different communities and really a continuation of the self-examination of you. As well as I do, Bruce, that the curatorial folks are as good as they come within the museum industry, and self-reflection on how we continue to tell the story and tell it as accurately and stay on top of things as absolutely possible is key. As I've learned in the museum business, you don't just show up on February 1st and now you have an exhibit June 1st. It takes 18 to 24 months of planning and preparation. So there's some plans down the road that we're going to start working on now. And I think just try to find some different ways that we continue to work with Major League Baseball, and that relationship's been great, particularly the MLB Network. The commissioner has been, wonderful to this institution, and then the clubs. And are there different opportunities that we can reach out to the clubs? John Shostakowski, our VP of Communications, and working with the Education Department, has a great outreach to each of the 30 clubs. But we want to enhance those to make sure that we don't lose any opportunities for artifacts that can continue to enhance our collection.
You mentioned curatorial, Tim. We just opened up a new exhibit on Friday, just yesterday. It's our Autumn Glory exhibit. It's the World Series exhibit that changes every year. Of course, this year's celebrates the Dodgers World Championship over the Rays, so that will be up for the next year. And in terms of more of a long-term approach, the curators are working on what used to be our Pride and Passion exhibit. It is now called Ideals and Injustices, a Chronicle of Black Baseball. And they're going to be making a major renovation, really almost a completely new exhibit of that current exhibit on the second floor. And that's going to happen over the next couple of years as well.
Absolutely, Bruce. And I think you bring up a great point. A lot of things obviously have transpired in 2020 that you look through the same lens that you had when these exhibits were put up, but you have to adjust that lens in current environment and moving forward. And, equity and justices has been one of those examples, is that we've gone back and looked at things. And, curatorial this past week has gone through extensively, did just kind of a review of all of our exhibits and looked at where some things may be updated. We may need to tinker and adjust a little bit. That's ongoing. And I always use that example of, you can have an elite club in August sitting on 85, 87 wins. They know for the most part they have that 12, 13 game lead they're going to play in October. But the job of a general manager is to make that club better so that they're stronger in October. And I think that is what our curatorial department does. And that's what their focus is we have something, some of these exhibits are going to be up for 10 to 15 years. You have to look to enhance them. And that's been part of the protocol of a very special group of people. And it's going to continue on. And I think, again, with an even stronger lens moving forward.
Should also point out that many of our curators join us for the virtual programs that we do. We tend to do about 1 to 2 a week that are completely free of charge, very generously sponsored by the Ford Motor Company. So that is part of our continuing virtual presence, which we do plan to continue even after the pandemic is done. Tim, let's go back to another question from our SABR audience. This question, has there been any consideration given to possibly removing the character clause from the rules for election? That's been a hot button topic in recent weeks.
No, there hasn't. And it's a great question, and certainly a topic of, it's almost an annual topic, but certainly in the last few years, it's risen to the top consistently. No, baseball is held to a different standard. And I felt that long before I got here, and examples with the Angels and different things that happened along the way. And everybody on this call can cite such an example. But if we are to say that baseball is reflective of society, one of the elements, the key elements of society is our character. And we can define that differently. We can agree to disagree on how we define it. It's a subjective discussion. The character is very, very important. And I don't think personally, because it might be difficult to define for everybody collectively, that it's something that we should push aside. Now, again, we're going to debate on how it should be utilized, but it's criteria that was put in place in 1945. And none of us in 2021 can get into the mindset of those who came up with that criteria and what they intended. But again, as we just talked about, our exhibits changing through a different lens as the years go by. Character is something that we may be defined differently, but the word itself represents something very, very important and very, very strong. And I think all of us are expected to have character growing up in our family unit, in our professional lives, in our personal lives with our family. And I don't think because it's a difficult topic that we should look to get away from it at all. And I believe in that standard being difficult. We are all expected in the workplace to have certain character and adhere to that. And some companies may look at it a little bit differently. Some may bend, some may be stricter. That's how subjective it is. But I think it has its place, and I would not like to see that altered.
The way it is currently stipulated on the rules for election, character, integrity, sportsmanship, which are very definite ideals, but there's some open-endedness there. Any thought given to maybe trying to more strictly define what character is, or do you think it should be kept the way it is?
I think because we've passed along that criteria to the BBWAA, Bruce, I'll get back to the point again. If you put 10 people in a room, you could come up with 10 different viewpoints of how that word can be defined, different degrees. And I think it's important to have those different perspectives. That's why it's an individual vote to arrive at a collective decision at the 75%. And the guidance is character. Even if you came up with that criteria to say this is what it should be, you're going to have disagreement with people that say, well, that's not what character means. So for the people that vote for it, let them define it. And the fact that it has become challenging and difficult, perhaps really is a testament to how important it is.
Another question, Tim, from our SABR audience. You started your career as an intern with the Angels. What advice would you give to someone who is just starting out in this crazy industry of baseball?
Figure out if you don't have a passion for it, don't start. This is not a job. This is and I say this all the time, this is a career. It is not a job. Just being a baseball fan doesn't make you qualified. Look, I'm a super fan. I've had 2 great jobs in baseball, but I have a passion for it. And that passion will allow you to get through, I think the same way as in your personal lives, it'll help you get through the tough days. It's something that you have to commit to. When you look at that calendar to understand what a season is in spring training, but I think you have to be a very selfless person. You just have to be. One of the great things that I've learned along the way, and I'll get back to that question, Bruce, is as we struggle in society with so many issues and different things that have gone on recently, when you're fortunate to be part of a baseball team, the great thing is you go down in a clubhouse, there's 25 players, 7 to 8 coaches, a manager, trainers, whomever. Nobody is trying to change anybody down there. Your viewpoints and your opinions, it's all accepted. But what you do is you exist toward a common goal. Okay, so all those other things just really don't matter. And that's why you don't hear a lot of issues. It's about playing in October and winning and commitment to winning. So when you're part of a team, and if you're fortunate to get in the game, I believe that same philosophy was applicable in the front office for us. So we didn't have a lot of discussions about other things. It was just fan experience and winning. Do everything you can to make the clubhouse comfortable, the people that are playing this game, their families, make it easy on them. The best interest of the club publicly. So that's what you need to sign up for, that commitment. The individuality, sure, you can cite a lot of examples, but the individuality on the front office level doesn't matter. If you're a young college student starting out, or if you're somebody 45 or 50 looking to change, don't go in and apply for a job as I know everything about the Red Sox or the Cardinals, I'm the best fan ever, and that's not it. Be yourself. Know that it's a work ethic. If you're looking to open a door, get FaceTime. It's more difficult than ever now with websites and HR departments. Try to talk to somebody. If you're looking to get into operations, spend time at a minor league ballpark with a scout or a college with a scout. Talk to people that have experience, pick their brains. I would tell you that PR people in general, to me, understand their responsibility of speaking to the next generation of people that want to get in. But understand that you're going to sacrifice a lot of time. This is not a 9-to-5 career with weekends off. It's rewarding. It's emotional, up and down. And many of you probably on this call have heard me say this. I think it's applicable to getting into baseball. I think it's applicable to pursuing anything you want to do. I wrote three letters to the Angels applying for an internship, knowing nothing about it. I had no idea what the structure was. And I had 3 rejection letters. And the third letter said, as previously, or thank you for your letter, as previously stated, we have no position openings at this time. Okay, I wanted to be in baseball. That's all I knew. That was the goal. A couple weeks, 2-3 weeks later, I got a call and was invited to become an intern. My point to that, as I say all the time, is if it's something you want bad enough, stay after it, be persistent, be diligent, let somebody know that that's what you're after. And sometimes, for all the education you have, for all the big words and all the connections, it's that persistence and diligence that might convince somebody that this person is somebody we're going to talk to. And that's really it. But love the game. Let somebody see your passion and commitment. Be selfless about it. And it's the greatest career you can have.
That's great advice. Keep checking in. You never know. The situation can change in a day or a week or a month. So even though they may not have a job today, it could be different 6 or 7 days from then. I'm curious, Tim, when you started as an intern in 1980, how long a day were you putting in for the Angels?
It was after school coming in. So I would work the games. You would leave basically between 11:30 at night. So I would arrive mid-afternoon. Those hours changed drastically. Yeah. My first year in 81, I lived in a place called Azusa. So it was about 24, 25 miles from the ballpark. And when I wasn't working the games and the club was on the road, I'd have to keep score of the game. Then in Azusa, drive to Anaheim and do a 2-minute audio report that I think 7 or 8 radio stations picked up, and then drive home. So it was almost like working a homestand. I think we figured it out. It made about $1.85 an hour that year in 81. But you know what? It was working in Major League Baseball, Bruce. And I always tell this story in my internship year. I had to do all the Xeroxing of the game notes, and teams would bring in their colored letterhead. You had the old Xerox machine that I think did 10 copies a minute or something. And I can remember getting an envelope and looking around, or a folder, and taking some of that letterhead home, because I thought, I'm not going to be back here again. This is my once in a lifetime opportunity to work in baseball. And I collected letterhead because you were just so excited to be part of something like that.
2 questions before we wrap it up with Tim Mead. I love this question from one of our audience members. In a given week, how many emails and phone calls are you receiving from Hall of Famers?
That's a great question, and it really depends on what's going on. In July, and again, I haven't had a normal year, but in recent weeks, because of losses, frequently, and a lot of it is not so much like on the club level. Players are constantly calling you for things, and it's more texting. You know, unfortunately, when we've had passings, guys are going to call or reach out about, hey, any additional information, which we do provide collectively, but there's some one-off conversations. Around the election time, it increased. You know, in July, it increases. The job of the president that Jeff did such a phenomenal job with was doing a lot of the traveling. So that will change, you know, when we're comfortable at airports again, and I'll be on the road a lot visiting the 72 remaining living members of the Hall, and in some cases, the widows of those who aren't with us.
Final question for Tim Mead. Think about 12 months from now, January, February of 2022. Tim, where would you like to see the Hall of Fame a year from now?
Prosperous, with most of this behind us, and really, Bruce, in a lot of ways, the same thing I wish for the Hall that I wish for society, that we've moved forward, because I think it's going to be very difficult for, one aspect or one fate or one aspect of society to move forward. But I look forward to ballparks being filled, having crowds standing outside the hall waiting to get in, the interaction with the parade down Main Street in July of 2022, everybody on that field, and telling stories of 2020, and where I'm glad that's behind us, and really just kind of a renewed sense of positivity around the game.
I'll make one final note to that. By this time next year, we'll know if anybody has made it from the era committees. And we'll also know if anybody has made it through the Baseball Writers Association ballot. Two of the headline names coming on next year for the first time, David Ortiz and Alex Rodriguez. So it should be a very interesting ballot. Tim, want to thank you for your time. Really have enjoyed it. I hope the viewers have as well. Thanks for being with us.
Bruce, thank you. And I appreciate you moderating this. And again, happy birthday to you.
Thank you very much, Tim. I appreciate that. We won't get into the years, although most people who know me know that it's well above 29 at this point. It's a long way above 29, but we won't talk about that any further. Thank you to Tim Mead, President of the Baseball Hall of Fame. I want to thank the folks at SABR, in particular, Scott Bush and Scott Carter. And also we'll remind people that coming up in the next hour should be a terrific conversation between Marty Appel. Marty has been to the Hall of Fame many times to do book signings and other programs, and he will be moderating a discussion with the terrific announcer Bob Costas, who of course is one of the winners of our Ford C. Frick Award. So that's coming up next hour. Thanks everybody, and we hope you continue to enjoy SABR Day 2021.
Hi, it's Keith Olbermann, SABR member since 1984. Should be SABR member since 1973, but the cost to get in was $5 back then, and that was also the price of the first annual SABR Research Journal for 1973. That book, though, tells you everything you need to know about how the Society for American Baseball Research has influenced baseball in the last half century, a greater influence than any organization or person except the Players Association. The cover story of that first Research Journal annual edition was about a plea to get a relatively obscure statistic adopted officially by baseball. It was called on-base percentage. That is where we were 50 years ago compared to the stats, the bios, the history of baseball that this organization has willed out of the catacombs of baseball history. Congratulations on 50 years, SABR. It's one of my proudest memberships on this planet.
Hey there, it's Heidi Watney from MLB Network. I just want to say congratulations on the 50th anniversary of SABR. I can't believe it's been 50 years. And the amount of advancement in baseball research and data and analytics over just the past 5 years is incredible, much less 50 years. Congratulations on reaching that milestone. Many more great things to come, I'm sure.
Getting a shout out to you today from Mr. October. You guys celebrating the 50th anniversary and coming up on 21. Congratulations to the organization and the members, and continued success and happiness for the next 50.
My name is Don Zmenda. I'm the former Director of Publications, and I'm the Director of Research for Stats LLC. I'm now retired and working on writing projects. I've been a SABR member since 1979, and I say with great enthusiasm that SABR has not only enriched my professional life, but my personal life as well, with the many lifelong friends I have met through this great organization. Happy 50th anniversary, SABR.
Hey everyone, it's me, the famous San Diego Chicken. I've been playing chicken for 47 years. But you know what's even more incredible? SABR has been around for 50 years. That's right, This is their golden anniversary. And for that, I've laid special golden eggs just for SABR. Look at that. Aren't they beautiful? Congratulations, SABR. I know, technically, I'm a rooster. But you guys are the statisticians. You do the math.
Hi, I'm Sean Foreman, president of Sports Reference and creator of Baseball Reference. SABR has just been a huge part of my life in baseball. You know, ever since I got started, every year I look forward to the convention, seeing people I know and working with people there. So happy anniversary to SABR. Congratulations on your 50th anniversary, and I hope there's another 50 after this one.
Hey everybody, this is Mark Carrig. I'm a national baseball writer at The Athletic, and I just wanted to take a moment today to congratulate SABR on its 50th anniversary.
I need to give you guys a shout out. An anniversary, 50 years next year, 2021, you guys will be having. Well, that's an awesome achievement right there. Hey, I just wish you guys have a great time together. Hopefully we can get rid of this COVID stuff right now. And hey, just stop and think about it. Crabs and beer and a little bit of wine. That'll be an awesome little celebration there for 2021. Hey, you guys have a great time. Again, this is Eddie Murray. You guys have another 50 more, okay? Thank you.
Well, I think Eddie maybe set everybody's dinner menu for this evening, maybe some crabs, beer, and a little bit of wine. Looking forward to that personally. I want to thank Tim Mead and Bruce Markusen for joining us today. That was really enjoyable to hear from both of them, and in particular, hearing Tim talk about the election process and how excited they are to welcome people back to the hall. Next up, we're excited to welcome one of the true legends of the broadcasting world. Bob Costas has been a titan of sports television for over 4 decades. The 2018 recipient of the Ford C. Frick Award from the National Baseball Hall of Fame and countless broadcasting accolades, Bob continues to share his incredible passion for baseball with fans on MLB Network and the world over. Our conversation with Bob today will be moderated by our friend Marty Appel. Marty is an award-winning author, former public relations director for the New York Yankees, and a SABR member since 1977. Please welcome Marty Appel and Bob Costas.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you for the introduction. Boy, am I looking forward to this. And to commemorate this, which must be the biggest hot stove gathering of the winter for all you SABR people, I brought my own hot stove with me. So we'll celebrate as a hot stove discussion with the great Bob Costas, who has been part of our baseball lives. Well, he started with NBC in 1980. And I happened to look this up, Bob. And when you started with NBC, Steve Allen still had a show on Sunday nights. So that takes us back a little bit.
And Mel Allen was still doing the occasional Yankee game.
That's right. So this is a kick for me, and this is sort of reversing thing for Bob, because he's really one of the master interviewers in America, in any genre, sports or otherwise. So today we turn the tables and we get to ask Bob a lot of questions. And Bob, I thought we'd start out, people seldom get to hear you do autobiographical summaries, but tell us about your growing up years, how you first became a baseball fan, and what your early influences were in becoming a fan.
Well, my earliest recollections of baseball come from the late 1950s. My dad took me to Ebbets Field and the Polo Grounds, as it happened, one game each in 1957, which turned out to be the last year for each in New York. But my only recollections of that are more atmospheric. My dad taking me to the game, being struck, as many kids of my generation were, by how different it looked as opposed to a flickering black and white television set that you had to fiddle with the antenna to get a clear picture. And now all of a sudden you're struck by the emerald green of the grass and how strikingly white the baselines and the batters' boxes were. But I don't remember any particulars about those games. So the Dodgers and the Giants leave, And as I'm really beginning to understand at some childlike level, understand baseball, the Yankees are the only team in New York. The Mets are still a few years away. And the Yankees are the premier team in baseball in the World Series almost every year. And Mickey Mantle is their best player. So it was natural for me, like almost everybody in the neighborhood, to be, unless they were a little older and they were carryover Dodger or Giant fans, they were Yankee fans, they were Mickey Mantle fans. And so, as you can see behind me, this is my backdrop during COVID in my home studio 24/7, which implies two things: that I'm available whenever the MLB network needs me, and also that this is my generation, Willie Mays and Mickey Mantle. And I'm reminded of what it was like to be a baseball fan then and what the influences were. The players were, of course, an influence. But in New York, and this was very unusual at that time around the major leagues, the vast majority of Yankee games were on television, just as the vast majority of Met games would be televised beginning in 1962. So between radio and TV, I'm listening to Mel Allen and to Red Barber, who had come over a few years earlier from the Dodgers to the Yankees. So to me, that's what baseball was. It wasn't just the games. It was the soundtrack of the games. And if I was playing wiffle ball or throwing a rubber ball against the stoop or against a handball wall or whatever it might have been, or basketball, it was Marty Glickman or later Marv Albert in my head while I was shooting baskets. And it was always Mel Allen or Red Barber in my head when I was playing Little League or whatever I was doing. I couldn't separate the sounds of the games from the games themselves. And for a year and a half in the early 1960s, we lived in California, in Southern California. So I was listening to Vin Scully on the transistor radio. And I was, I don't know that I was the brightest kid, but I was bright enough to realize if I was ever going to get into a ballpark without having to pay for the ticket, it wasn't going to be to stand where Willie or Mickey stood. It would be to sit where Vin or Red or Mel had sat. And so I think the first notion of being a broadcaster came to me when I was about 9 or 10 years old.
Did you save baseball cards or play board games or table games or anything like that?
Played Stratomatic, which, and I hope I don't offend anybody, I greatly preferred to APBA, greatly preferred Stratomatic. And we used to make, my cousin and I were big, my cousin John Miller, who, and it's interesting, something gets in your blood when you're a kid. I haven't played Stratomatic in decades and decades, except if I get together with my cousin. I'm in my late 60s, he's in his early 70s. He was a very successful oncologist for many years. But somehow, if it's the two of us, we're going to play Stratomatic, and we're also, as an aside, going to play Stratego. It takes us back to when we were 12, 14 years old, or whatever it might be. So yes, I did that. And I collected baseball cards, but never for the reasons that so many people collect them today. Never as an investment, only as an attachment to baseball. And you would never risk by flipping, you'd never risk a Willie Mays or a Mickey Mantle. But you might risk your fourth Hector Lopez or Jerry Lumpy to put on the spokes of your bike. So when you pedaled around the neighborhood, it made that cool, clipping sound. And we invented games which may be foreign to kids today. You flip them, someone would toss it out. If it came up heads, you tried to match it. And if you didn't, he took the two cards. If you did, you took the two cards. We played a game that we called Knock a Leaner, which is to knock down a leaner. And you put the card at the base of the wall, and you paste off a certain distance depending upon your perceived skill, and then you scaled your other cards and tried to clip the card and knock it down. And every miss became part of the pot. And eventually, if someone knocked it down, then they collected the entire pot. And you get to a point where if you were totally down to your Hank Aaron's and your Whitey Fords and whomever, well, all right, take them all, but I'm not going to risk this. You can take them all, but I'm getting into the Hall of Fame, guys. I'm not going to go any further.
Now, you famously kept a Mickey Mantle card in your wallet for many years. Is it still there?
Yeah, and you know what? This is so stupid. I'm not going to interrupt and run all the way upstairs and get it. If I go out, which hardly ever happens these days until the COVID cloud is lifted, but if I go out, if I'm wearing a suit or for that matter, a tuxedo, it's in the breast pocket. If I'm wearing a t-shirt and a pair of jeans, just going out to get a cup of coffee and pick up the newspaper, it's in my back pocket because I can't disappoint people. I'm not saying it happens constantly, but it does happen. Normal circumstances, a few times a week, someone will say, a stranger, Bob, do you have the mantle card? And there have been a couple of occasions where I haven't, and I was sure that that person walked away thinking I was a fraud. But 999 times out of 1,000, I have had it. And the story is one that many kids of my generation can relate to. I kept the cards in shoe boxes. And on a rainy day, you'd arrange them according to position or how you ranked them, or according to league, according to team, whatever it was, and you had them cataloged that way. I probably stopped buying baseball cards when I was 13, 14 years old. So they sat in a closet for a while, neatly arranged in the box, or boxes, shoe boxes. And you go off to college, and while I'm seemingly minding my own business and studying at Syracuse, my mom decides this is clutter. She's cleaning out the closet, and away it went. But a 1958 Mickey Mantle survived the purge. And so I kept it as, you know, sort of a connection to my youth, and never made a big deal out of it. And when I was doing the game of the week with Tony Kubek in the 1980s, of course, Tony was Mickey's teammate for many years with the Yankees, I must have reached for a credit card or something at dinner, and he saw the mantle card. And then he mentioned it the next day on the game of the week. And the following week, Sports Illustrated had a small item about it. So then the cat was out of the bag and everybody knew, and then I could never be without it. And I haven't been to this day.
Great. It was actually his all-star card from that
That's
year,
right.
right?
Yeah, a red background. He's swinging right-handed. It's a head-to-toe shot with gold stars arrayed around him, a perennial all-star.
Beautiful. I'd like to talk to you about kind of a sad story, but I think we'll have some good memories out of it. We know 10 Hall of Famers passed away in the last 9 months. It's remarkable. A year ago at the SABR convention, there were 82 living Hall of Famers. Now we have 72.
Yeah.
Remarkable. I'm going to throw the names out to you and ask you for memories you might have of time spent with them, or anything about them that comes to mind.
Sure.
So let's start with Tommy Lasorda.
Well, one of the genuine personalities of all time. And some people thought, cynics, oh, it's an act. It may have been an act on the occasional day where he didn't feel up to it, but he knew it's what people expected of him. But 99% of the time, it was just an amplification of his true personality. That was him. I never caught him in a moment that I thought, no, this is phony. And the story that connects Tommy and me, that's best known to the public, comes from the 1988 World Series. I'm hosting the pregame show. Vin Scully and Joe Garagiola are doing the games. And before game 4, not only is Kirk Gibson not available, as anybody on a SABR call knows, his only at-bat of the 88 World Series was the homer off Eckersley, the miracle to win game 1. So Gibson is out. And now after game 3, Mike Marshall is out. And you look at the A's starting lineup, Canseco had more home runs individually than the entire Dodger lineup. And Mark McGwire nearly did. And that Dodger lineup had Alfredo Griffin at shortstop, had once been a very good player with the Blue Jays at the back end of his career. Steve Sachs was in the lineup, but that was really kind of the peak for that team. Rick Dempsey at the back end of his career after many good years with the Orioles. Dave Anderson is at third base. Franklin Stubbs is in the lineup. John Shelby's in the lineup. Mickey Hatcher is in left field. Mike Davis, who had been a power threat with the A's at one time, had 3 home runs all season and batted under 200 for the Dodgers. He's in that lineup. So I look at the lineup and I say, pitching aside, and Dodger pitching is very good. And remember, Hershiser had won game 2. He was on an incredible Cy Young roll, and he was scheduled to pitch game 5. And all of us knew if it went to a 7th, he pitched game 7 on 2 days rest. That's the way the game was in those days. That's the way he felt about it. That's what Lasorda would have done. So I didn't think for a moment that the Dodgers didn't have a chance. I thought they were actually in control of the series, all things considered. But I said, pitching aside, and Dodger pitching is very good, this may be the weakest lineup ever to take the field for a World Series game. And Lasorda and the Dodgers are in the visitors clubhouse in Oakland, and Tommy, being Tommy, hears that, sees it, says, "See that? Even Costas doesn't give us a chance." And then apparently, according to many witnesses and Tommy himself, he started a chant that went, "Kill Costas, kill Costas." So now I finished the pregame show. I'm standing along the first base line for the pregame show on the field at the Oakland Coliseum, and they start playing the national anthem, so I can't get off the field. I don't want to be disrespectful. And I wind up standing at the end of the Dodgers line of players. And Hershiser is going to pitch the next night, is at the end of the line. And so he looks over his left shoulder with his cap over his heart and says to me, "Boy, you really got Tommy and the guys worked up." And at first I have no idea what he's referring to. But then it becomes clear to me, and Lasorda used it as a rallying cry. And when the game was over and Marv Albert is interviewing him, he says, "You should name Bob Costas the MVP of the game because he sparked our victory," et cetera, et cetera. And I knew that he wasn't angry at all. And in fact, when I came over to him after the game, he's winking at me. He thinks this is just great. But Tony La Russa, who's in a foul humor because he's now down 3-1, he doesn't think it's so great. He's getting the story second and third hand. He thinks that Lasorda and I were in cahoots to try and, give him some sort of pep talk material for the Dodgers. So I had to go into La Russa's office before Game 5 and smooth things over with Tony. So, Tommy's Tommy.
Okay, a guy who may be the best second baseman in baseball history, and who went on to go into your line of work, Joe Morgan.
Joe Morgan at his peak, no doubt, with respect to Roberto Alomar, Ryne Sandberg, and others, no doubt, at his peak, Joe Morgan was the best second baseman of the second half of the 20th century. I'll leave it to SABR people to parse how you compare Joe Morgan in his era to Rogers Hornsby or Napoleon Lajoie or Eddie Collins or whomever else, Charlie Gehringer. But of the players I saw at his peak, the Bill James notion that others have picked up on of peak value, that mid-70s Joe Morgan is just a magnificent player. Hit for uncommon power for a middle infielder of his era. High stolen base totals with a very high percentage, was seldom caught stealing. Seldom struck out, but walked more than 100 times every year. So the OPS is off the chart. Gold Glove fielder, one of the smartest players by all accounts of those he played with and against. And in my interaction with him, an admirable man, a man of principle, old school in many respects, but progressive when it came to issues of fairness and social justice. An interesting blend of those two. I miss him very much. I was very close to him.
The chairman of the board, Whitey Ford.
Maybe you'll relate to this, Marty. I remember a commercial, a black and white TV commercial, maybe when I was 9 or 10 years old. And I don't remember the product, but Whitey was the pitch man for the product. And there was a shot of him delivering a pitch. And the announcer said with admiration, "This man can throw a baseball 75 miles an hour." Wow, 75 miles an hour. That's about 10 miles beneath a routine changeup these days. But that was the beauty of Whitey Ford. He didn't overpower anybody. He was a left-handed forerunner of Greg Maddux. Pinpoint control, pitch to soft contact, knew how to pitch in Yankee Stadium, left-hander in Yankee Stadium with all that expanse, didn't want you to hit it down the lines. But if you hit it in the gaps or to center field, pretty good chance that Mickey Mantle or somebody else would run it down. At one time, his World Series record was 10-2. And of course, he had broken Babe Ruth's record for consecutive scoreless innings pitched in World Series play. And on a personal level, I always thought he was appealingly coy about the exploits of the Yankees of the 50s and 60s. Whenever any question was put to him about what might have happened, be it at the Copacabana or someplace else on the road or in New York, it was just, "Bob, I don't recall. My memory's just not serving me well here. I don't recall." And then he'd kind of smile. That code on the clubhouse wall, what you see here, what you hear here, it stays here. he lived by that 100%.
Very good. Bob Gibson.
Bob Gibson, on a personal basis, Marty, was so different from the intimidating aura that served him so well on the mound. It is true that unless you were a teammate of his, he would look right through you. Joe Torre has famously told the story of the 1965 All-Star game. He's catching. Gibson comes in to pitch the ninth. Tony Oliva comes up in the ballpark in Minnesota, his home ballpark, and Torre goes out to the mound to tell Gibson, don't throw him anything down and in. And Gibson doesn't even acknowledge Torre's presence. He just looks right through him, throws him something down and in, and Oliva whips a double into the right field corner. But then Gibson gets the next guys out. The game is over, and as luck would have it, Torre and Gibson are the last two guys in the shower, and Torre just says something kind of boilerplate, nice pitching, Bob. And again, he looks right through him. But subsequently, when they became teammates with the Cardinals, and later when Joe was managing the Braves and Gibson is his pitching coach, they become the closest of friends. I mean, really, really close friends. And when you got to know Bob Gibson, as I was lucky enough to, he was the complete opposite of that. He was so welcoming, so gentle, so interested in other people beyond himself. I never heard him once brag or talk about himself unless someone asked him about something he had done. He was the epitome of someone who believed that what he had done spoke for itself. On the other hand, on the ball field, he lived by that code. The second to last batter he ever faced in the major leagues in 1975, he was 40 years old and struggling, a game at the old Busch Stadium. Pete Lecoq of the Cubs hits a grand slam home run. Red Schoendienst didn't want to go out and take Gibson out of the game. He had too much respect for him. So he did get Don Kessinger to ground out to end the inning. And that was the last game that Gibson ever pitched in the major leagues. 10 years later, there's an old timers game at Wrigley Field. Gibson is pitching. Up comes Pete Lecoq. You know what comes next? He hit him. It might have been 75 miles per hour, but he hit him. And when I'd heard that story and then I asked him about it, this is what he said verbatim. He looked at me, he said, Robert, the scales must be balanced no matter how long it takes.
Beautiful.
I love Gibby.
Don Sutton.
Don Sutton, we know about the fact that he was a workhorse. Among modern pitchers, few, if any, approach his innings pitched. He took the ball. He went out there. He went deep into games. He won more than 300 games. At the beginning of his career, think about it, the starting rotation for the Dodgers included Sandy Koufax, Don Drysdale, and a young Don Sutton, 3 Hall of Famers. On a personal level, you know, when you get to know guys, you find out what their little affinities are and their little quirks. Don loved 50s and 60s rock and roll, and he knew that I did too. So every time he saw me, before I could say anything, he'd hit me. He'd hit me with one, you know, at the hop. And I'd say, Danny and the Juniors. And he'd be pissed off because he didn't stump me. And it reached its zenith at Fenway Park one Saturday afternoon around 1984 or something like that. I guess he was pitching for the Angels at that point. I may be slightly off, but sometime in the mid 80s. And no one had a cell phone then. And somehow the phone rings in the booth at Fenway Park. And the stage manager hands me the phone. It's for you. Hello. Hey, look down over here. He's in the visitor's dugout on the third base side at Fenway Park. He's not pitching that day. He waves up to me. He goes, rescue me. I said, Fontella Bass. He said, damn it. And he hung up the phone.
I'm reminded of what Peter Bavesi told me not long ago, that baseball's all about the stories. Never mind the scores. It's all about the stories. And your stories are great.
It absolutely is. And I'd say this, Marty, I am more than interested in the work of SABR. I'm more than interested in modern analytics. I used to read Bill James stuff. I was at KMOX in St. Louis, big 50,000 watt station in the 70s. It booms out over the Midwest. And so Bill James could hear it at his home in Lawrence, Kansas. And I read an article about him in Esquire, I think, in the late 1970s. I contacted him. He put me on his mailing list. I was reading the baseball abstract when it was just something he mimeographed in his house. I put him on KMOX. There are references made by me that are still knocking around in the archives somewhere in the 80s, references to Bill James on the baseball game of the week. But having said that, how is it that Vin Scully or Jack Buck or Harry Carey or Red Barber or Mel Allen or really any of the truly good announcers today can get by without having to know the exit velocity on every ball ever pitched, every ball ever hit in the game? There has to be a balance between the anecdotal, the storytelling, the humanity of the game, and the mere calculations of the game. You know, I look at a lot of the information we get, and the research department of the Major League Baseball Network is fantastic. I look at it, I'm interested in all of it, but I'm only interested in using about 10% of it. Because unless it illustrates some really interesting larger point or trend, I'd rather hear a story. I'd rather hear John Smoltz tell me something funny about Greg Maddux or Bobby Cox than perform an autopsy on every pitch in the game. You know, I just think that one of the things that distinguishes baseball is its history, its pace, which should be a pleasing leisurely pace, not a lethargic pace. That's a separate issue. Its history, its pace, its humanity, the everyday nature of the game, which means that not every game is a spectacle, not every game is life and death. You think about how we feel about it, and the attachment that especially local fans have to their local announcer. It's a visit with those two guys in the booth, or whatever it may be, on a daily or nightly basis. And I don't want us to get to the point where it's all just cold fact and cold statistics. There has to be a human element to it.
Very good. Which brings us to Tom Seaver.
Yeah, you know, Tom was one of the most thoughtful athletes I've ever spoken with. He was a very intelligent man, and his combination of head and heart were really on display at Cooperstown. Must have been 10 years ago now, induction weekend, and he's back there with the Hall of Famers. And I sat with him at the Otesaga Hotel, and we rolled tape for an hour, and it became a Studio 42. And he was so precise in his recollections of specific situations. But toward the end, he said, you have to understand, this was a craft, but when it was perfect, it became art. This was my art. And he touched his heart. And he said, when I walk through the gallery, I wonder if Christy Mathewson and I had a conversation, would we have a lot in common? Because he had that drop and drive, like he'd seen old flickering black and white primitive films of Christy Mathewson, which Keith Olbermann actually had brought to light. And it looked like they had a similar drop and drive approach as right-handed pitchers. What would my conversation be like with Walter Johnson or with Lefty Grove? You know, he had a real feel for the history of the game, and he was simultaneously acutely intelligent, but deeply heartfelt and emotional. I liked him very, very much.
I know you said of the 10, Al Kaline is the one that you really didn't get to know very well. He had retired before you were on the scene. But I wouldn't want this segment to go by without mentioning Al Kaline, of course.
Very, very gentlemanly. I just never had the opportunity, to my regret, to spend that much time with him. But whenever I saw him, he was always very classy, and that's everybody's testimony about Al. I never interviewed him one-on-one, but I did have Al and Willie Horton on a program about Bob Gibson and about the first game of the World Series in '68 when Gibson struck out the still record 17 World Series record, 17 batters in a single World Series game. And Kaline said that on that day, Bob Gibson was the best pitcher he had ever faced.
By the way, I remember the Whitey Ford commercial. It was for Harrow Pools in Long Island.
It was?
Yes.
This is not a setup. This is not a setup.
Not at all.
Two summers in the early 70s, between years at Syracuse University, I worked at Harrow's swimming pools.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, they sold those above ground swimming pools. You know, so I had to become properly versed in how you test the pH. You put this in the water, and this is supposed to turn blue, and this is supposed to turn green, et cetera, et cetera. And then they switched, although I wasn't part of this because I was back at school. But when Christmas time came around, they sold Christmas trees and Christmas decorations. But during the spring and summer, they sold swimming pools. That's my connection.
Your story is complete. Your story is complete. And when you tell this next time, you've got a full circle story there.
Yep.
Very good. Phil Negro.
Another guy who, and this is true of many Hall of Famers, but Phil was just such a sweet-natured man. When I was lucky enough to receive the Ford C. Frick Award, within a few days, a letter arrived at my house, and it was from Phil Negro, just congratulating me, written in longhand, happy to have you be part of Cooperstown. He wasn't the only one. There were some others, but his came first. I don't think that guy had a mean bone in his body. And one thing that's overlooked about him, fluttering knuckleball, that becomes the whole story. He was a multiple gold glove winner. He was an exceptionally good fielding pitcher. And one of the things I think that made Phil relatable is that no one looked at him as a super athlete. This is the guy, this is like my uncle that I played catch with in the backyard, right? That's what he looked like. But he had to be a much better athlete than that if he won all those gold gloves.
He had more time to set up to field than.
Well, good point. Good point.
Lou Brock.
Lou was in St. Louis, was known as the Base Burglar. And he had a show with Jack Buck called The Base Burglar Show that ran like once a week before a Cardinal game. Unfailingly good-natured, totally beloved in St. Louis. And I know some people get tired of hearing people say that St. Louis might be the best baseball town. I don't know if you can single out any one group of fans as the best, but I couldn't put any fan base ahead of Cardinal fans for the combination of their passion for the game, their knowledge of the game. After all, the Cardinals have a long and storied and largely successful history. And even in this era, where social media and sports talk radio can turn things really ugly, by and large, fans in St. Louis are civil. So that combination of knowledge, passion, and civility distinguishes St. Louis fans. So Lou was part of that group that comes back every year on opening day with their red Cardinal jackets, and part of a very large contingent of great St. Louis players who may not have been born and raised in St. Louis, but once they got there and established themselves there, they became St. Louisans. They became St. Louisans for life, and Lou was part of that.
Well, I saved number 44 for last. And if you had room on your backdrop there and the time to do it, he'd have fit in.
Henry. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I don't know how 24/7 made sense.
Yeah.
So that's why it became Willie and Mickey. Hank Aaron, his wife, Billy, was kind enough. And all of a sudden, you notice my wife, Jill, just came in and turned off 2 lights that were on the side. So now I'm not shining like a Christmas tree anymore. So that's good. Billy Aaron was kind enough to ask me to be one of the eulogists at Hank's funeral. And what I said in my eulogy for Hank, I talked about a story he had told me and a few others about idolizing Jackie Robinson growing up. And when the Dodgers played an exhibition game, barnstorming north from spring training in Florida up to Brooklyn, they stopped in Mobile and played an exhibition game there. And Hank was maybe 14 years old. And Jackie Robinson addressed a small group of Black citizens at a storefront, either a drugstore or a grocery store, on the morning of the game. And Hank skipped school to hear him speak, and then didn't have the money to buy a ticket to get into the ballpark, but climbed a tree, a very tall tree that was beyond the right field fence, climbed a tree to look into the ballpark to see Jackie Robinson play. Jackie Robinson had no way of knowing that that kid who skipped school to hear him speak and climbed a tree to see him play would go on to become, in many respects, the most consequential and significant baseball player since Jackie Robinson. It's a baseball debate whether Hank Aaron is better than Willie Mays, or whether Mickey Mantle at his best, not over the course of his full career, but at his best, is in the same category as Hank and Willie. Those are baseball debates. But I think all things considered, it is beyond debate that the most significant player in the biggest sense since Jackie Robinson is Hank Aaron. And what you heard this past week about his decency as a human being, 100% true. So kind, so giving, so interested in using his platform in doing what he could for other people, a loyal friend, just an exemplary human being who happened also to be a great, great baseball player.
You were hardly an elder statesman of the game at the time, but you were asked to be a eulogist at Mickey Mantle's funeral in 1995. Yeah. You said 4 words during that eulogy that I still kind of choke up when I repeat them. And it was, he was our guy.
Yeah.
That day?
Yeah, for a portion of America, a very large portion of America, he was our guy. That's no slight toward Willie Mays. For them, a large portion of America, he was their guy. And one of the most gratifying things that came out of being Mickey's eulogist was, this is back when people wrote letters more often than they do now. I got about 10,000 letters after Mantle's eulogy because Mickey had meant so much to so many people and they saw me as a surrogate for them in that situation. And that's exactly how I saw myself. I think I said that. I said that Mel Allen is the eternal voice of the Yankees. And to be a spokesperson for the Yankees, that would be Mel's place. Just as when I eulogized Stan Musial, I used the same reference with regard to Jack Buck. But it was my feeling was that I was standing up there representing a generation of baseball fans for whom Mickey Mantle meant something beyond just his prodigious on-field achievements. The game had a different kind of connection then, of romance and mythology and whatever, whatever it might have been. And one of the most gratifying things was, while I got lots of letters from Yankee fans and Mickey Mantle fans, I got hundreds that went something like this. I grew up in Detroit and I idolized Al Kaline. I was a Cub fan. My guy was Ernie Banks, but I knew exactly what you were talking about. And that was very gratifying to me that point came across. This wasn't parsing who's better or who matters more. It was trying to get to the idea of what baseball could mean to a kid, especially in that generation, and how it stayed with you, even into adulthood. It stayed with you. And how I had heard from so many people as it became clear that Mickey wasn't going to make it, and that the end was near. I'd heard from a lot of people who I hadn't heard from in many years. And some of them were no longer big baseball fans. But when they heard about Mickey, it struck a chord with them. You know, it's one of those things, it's kind of like Field of Dreams. I had this conversation with Kevin Costner once. If you get it, no explanation needed. If you don't, no explanation possible.
I think sometimes of Mickey as baseball's first television star.
Yeah.
And to underscore that, he was in the World Series 12 times in his first 14 seasons.
Mm-hmm.
He was on the NBC fall schedule as often as Bonanza was. So that's why he had such a national impact, and everybody would watch Mickey in the World Series, of course.
Yeah, you know, and Willie's in the World Series in '54, and he's in the World Series against Mickey and the Yankees in '62. But Mickey and the Yanks were perennials. And, you know, anyone, again, I'm dating myself here, but it's my generation. It's my baseball story. For a huge portion of America, the World Series had come on. They'd hear that Gillette theme. Dun, 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 dun. And they were all day games, but somehow those day games, now granted the television universe was much smaller and the choices were fewer, But those day games got ratings that dwarfed what primetime games get today. So Mickey Mantle was in the consciousness of America, not just baseball fans, but the general. He was a pop culture figure in the way that subsequently someone like Michael Jordan was, or Tom Brady is. He was that big.
We have a few minutes to get in some questions that were submitted. Let's see if we can knock some of these off. What's the most memorable game you ever covered?
Most memorable regular season game, easy. The Sandberg game, 1984. Tony Kubek and I are in the booth at Wrigley Field. It's the Cardinals against the Cubs. It makes a difference that it was the Cardinals because it is that rivalry. It's not a tooth and nail rivalry like the Red Sox and Yankees or like the Giants and Dodgers have been at various times. More or less a friendly rivalry, but there's still passion. Lots of red shirts at Wrigley, lots of blue shirts when the Cubs come to St. Louis. So you had that. It was a perfect Saturday afternoon weather-wise at Wrigley Field. The game gets underway and the Cubs are down 9-3, I think, at one point. They come back and make it 9-8. And then with Bruce Sutter on the mound, Sandberg homers in the bottom of the ninth to tie it 9-9. It's a different era. Whitey Herzog has Sutter in the game for 3 innings. He's the best he's got. He's the best reliever in the game. Cardinals go up in the 10th, 11-9 on a double by Willie McGee, which only incidentally in the retelling gives him the cycle for the game. And also during the course of the game, Ozzie Smith, of course, has made several eye-popping plays. There's all kinds of texture to the game. Now it's 11-9, 2 out, nobody on. Bob Dernier at the plate, 3-2 count. And on a very borderline pitch, he walks. That brings Sandberg up again. He's already got 4 hits in the game. Sutter's still on the mound. He homers to almost exactly the same spot in the left center field bleachers. Almost like the same fan could have caught it. And now the score is 11-11. And eventually, the Cubs win it 12-11 on a base hit over a drawn-in infield by Dave Owen, Spike Owen's brother, who kiddingly says, I think of it as the Dave Owen game. After all, I got the winning hit. But that's the game. I mean, other than the Pine Tar game, the George Brett game, I can't think of a regular season game that has a name. But around Chicago especially, everybody knows what the Sandberg game is. There have been 3 or 4 documentaries about that one game alone. And that was the moment that kind of marked Ryne Sandberg as a candidate for MVP and said to the nation, you got to understand what the game of the week was then. It really was the game of the week. If you lived in Montana and you were a baseball fan, you didn't mow your lawn during those 2.5, 3 hours. You were watching baseball because that was your one chance to do it. It captured an entire national audience, and it kind of marked the Cubs as a real contender. It marked Sandberg as an MVP candidate, and he did win it. And after he hit that second home run, I said something to the effect of, you might be looking at the real Roy Hobbs here. This is the real Natural, because the Natural had only come out a few months before. So it was still in theaters. It was still in people's minds.
Someone asked if your show Later will ever be seen anywhere, or is it available anywhere?
It's popping up all the time on YouTube. People tell me. There's some guy in Cleveland who must have been making old VHS tapes in the late 80s and early 90s. And he's releasing them in dribs and drabs. And over time, I think there's about 50 of them floating around out there. And people have called it to my attention. And some of them I remember. And others I'm like, hey, I guess I did interview Anthony Perkins about Psycho. Does that mean with a young Sarah Jessica Parker? Yeah, I guess it is. Yeah. So it's on YouTube. And without revealing any details, there have been some talks. You have all these new platforms now and streaming services and whatnot. So it's gratifying that people are still interested in it. And it'll probably find something closer to a permanent official home sometime in the future.
How about Sounds of the Game, which you're doing currently on MLB Network on all the Frick winners?
As we're
doing all the Frick winners?
I don't think we'll do all the Frick winners. There's not enough footage or audio material on all of them. But so far we've done, I hope I don't leave anybody out, Vin Scully, Jack Buck, Harry Carey, Bob Uecker, Al Michaels, Tony Kubek, Kurt Gowdy, And on Monday, we're going to tape for airing on February 8th, Red Barber and Mel Allen. And that is partly the answer to your question. Red and Mel certainly deserve their own programs, but there's not enough footage. So we have to combine the two of them as the first, they won the first two Frick Awards. They went in simultaneously. Two of them, the first year that the Frick Award was given. And so we'll give them their full due as pioneers and as great broadcasters. And beyond that, I think we want to get to some of the contemporary announcers. We want to get to John Miller. We want to get to Tom Hamilton and Gary Cohen and Pat Hughes and people like that. And it's proven to be very popular. It's something that we get more feedback about than almost anything we do these days on the MLB network.
We've only got a minute or so left. It's like not finishing the double jeopardy round and leaving some questions on the board, but Bonds or Aaron, who holds the home run record?
Henry Aaron holds the authentic home run record. Barry Bonds is the statistical home run leader. 715 enhanced Henry Aaron. 756 diminished Barry Bonds.
Well put. How'd you feel about the Negro Leagues being recognized as a major league?
First of all, anyone who knows and appreciates baseball history already knew about the glory of the Negro Leagues. And I hope that this is properly understood. I'm not alone in this. Howard Bryant, who has a wonderful biography of Hank Aaron out now, pretty close to definitive. Howard Bryant feels the same way I do. Through no fault of their own, the essence of the Negro Leagues is that they were separate. It is both the injustice and the glory. The injustice is overwhelming. The injustice of baseball being segregated is worse than every other scandal or flaw that you can think of. Steroids, Astros cheating, anything you want to talk about, put together and multiplied by 1,000. If every player, all of their wives and all the bat boys had been on steroids, that isn't as bad as baseball, our national game, a meritocracy, having been segregated. But having said that, the whole essence and story of the Negro Leagues is how they dealt with that injustice. Just watch the shadow ball episode of Ken Burns' Baseball that made Buck O'Neil a national figure. That's the story of it. It's some kind of virtue signaling to say we're going to declare them these statistics, major league statistics. I certainly respect what the researchers have done. They're diligent about it. They're dedicated to it. But what good does it do to say that Josh Gibson has 113 home runs that we can verify? The legend says he might have hit 800. The legend's probably closer to the truth. Is Josh Gibson enhanced or done justice by 113? Does it make any sense that because a young Willie Mays had a handful of at-bats for the Birmingham Black Barons in 1948, we're now going to incorporate that with his stats beginning with the Giants in 1951, and Willie's lifetime batting average goes from 302 to 301? Here's what I say. Everybody who can, go visit the Negro Leagues Museum. Read I read Only the Ball Was White when it came out when I was 18, 19 years old. Read every book you can read about the Negro Leagues. Make more documentaries. Have historians go back if there's anyone that was overlooked. They thought they closed the book on Negro League players being inducted at Cooperstown, but I wouldn't mind reopening it. But I just don't see how these sketchy statistics, declaring them major league, how that really enhances the story. The legend is more important than the cold facts, and the cold facts are incomplete. So, yeah, I understand the motivation. It may come from a good place. I just think it's off.
Quickly, one last one. A runner on second base to start extra innings. How'd you like that?
Well, thankfully, they didn't use it in the postseason. And if it ever takes hold once we're post-COVID, it will never be used in the playoffs or the World Series. I mean, I understand the motivation, but I wouldn't like to see it if they ever adopt it. I would only go to it like in the 12th inning or something like that. At least play a couple of innings under normal circumstances. And here's something that you lose. When you have the real marathon games, they become part of baseball lore, you know? John Smoltz and I did a game 5-6 years ago at Yankee Stadium, Yankees Red Sox, and it went 19 innings. Mark Teixeira Mark Teixeira is playing first base. There's a pop like in the 14th inning over toward the tarp. He goes running for it, and it's just off the tip of his glove. Now we're well past midnight, and now it is Mark Teixeira's 36th birthday. And I said, well, yesterday when he was 35, he probably would have reached it. But age just caught up with him during the course of the game. Couldn't quite get to it. Later, there was a shot of a young guy and a young woman, and he's in Yankee garb, and she's in Red Sox garb. So the point of the shot from the director's point of view is, we have détente. There's peace here. And it's about 2 o'clock in the morning, and she's got her head on his shoulder. And I said, the interesting thing is, these two only met in the 4th inning, and now they're engaged. So, you lose something. How often does a game really go that long? But we remember those games. So, I'm old school on this. I could do without that. I could do without that rule. You know what I like, though? A pitch clock with no one on base. A pitch clock with no one on base, I like. We don't need Pedro Baez taking 30 seconds between pitches with nobody on base in the 6th inning. Let's keep things moving.
Well, Scott, I think we've wrapped it up here. And I know that if this was a live audience in our presence, there'd be a standing ovation going on right now for Bob Costas. Bob, you did a book 20 years ago. It's time for another one. And after that book came out, a lot of people said, this guy should be commissioner of baseball. And I think baseball could be well served.
Well, you know what I said then and I say now? Not interested because I'm not qualified. And the analogy I always use was, if you think someone's a good commentator or columnist about politics, that doesn't mean you think he or she should be senator, president, or Supreme Court justice. You're just glad that whatever they have to say is part of the discussion. So if anything I've said over the years about baseball resonates with people, that's fine, because that's my job. I'm a sports broadcaster who especially is interested in baseball. But I was never qualified by temperament, by background, by knowledge of economics, never qualified to be commissioner, only qualified to occasionally put a bug in the commissioner's ear.
Okay. Scott, turning it back to you, and thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you, Marty.
Hi, everyone. I'm Steve Garvey. It's going to be the 50th anniversary of SABR this coming year. I had the opportunity last year to speak to the organization, to meet many of you, and I had the best of times. You do what you do better than anybody else. You make a difference in sports, and the old blend of knowledge and metrics seems to be working for these championship teams, so keep it up. And hopefully I'll be able to do another video for you when you turn 100. Well, that'll mean I'm 120. Oh, well. Well, God bless. Congratulations, and Semper Fi.
Hi, my name is Alexis Brudnicki, and I work for Major League Baseball as a baseball development and special projects reporter. I am also a proud recipient of a SABR award back in 2016. I personally love that SABR has built its brand around being a place for people to listen to, talk about, read about baseball, and just brings a broader community together. So I couldn't be happier to wish SABR a happy golden 50th anniversary.
Hello, I'm Ed Fong, a relatively new member of SABR. Since joining SABR in 2017, I've witnessed significant growth in membership, expansion of SABR services and offerings, and an increasing scope of research subject areas. Long-term SABR members have provided depth and breadth in research and has left a lasting legacy for the first 50 years. As we celebrate SABR's 50th year, this past year, 2020, because of challenging circumstances and therefore by necessity, SABR has demonstrated its adaptability and capabilities to innovate with a growing digital presence and provisioning of virtual events. I wish all a safe and healthy 2021 and impatiently wait until I can see and meet many of you in a physical presence. And with new members, please begin to shape SABR's next 50 years. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Rob Nyer. Happy birthday, SABR. I can say without any reservation that most of the best things that have happened in my life over the last 35, 40 years have been due to my association with SABR, whether it's the great jobs that I've had, the books that I've written, and especially the friends that I have made. I owe almost all of it to being a SABR member. So again, thank you, SABR. Happy birthday, and here's to 50 more wonderful years.
Dave Winfield here,